Thank you, everybody, for joining us for part 2 of the workshop on regular and substantive interaction. I am here with my fabulous coworker, Tara Perrin. She's waving to the audience. She will be monitoring chat as we get going. I am Karen Hein. I am an instructional designer with MTSU Online. And so we are here really to talk about more of the strategies and approaches to regular and substantive interaction. If you've got any questions, please do raise them in the chat or, feel free to shout them out. These slides will be made available to you after the presentation, and we will make sure that we share another handout that we've got that will sort of summarize some of these ideas. So as we go on, there was a question that was asked before we started recording about, did I need to attend part 1 of the workshop? The answer is no. We'll try to do a little bit of a review so that you've got a little bit more background to get started, but we believe that these are concepts that you probably already have experience with, but we just know that as part of our quality assurance matters, we need to ensure that all of our online courses specifically can meet the regulation about regular and substantive interaction that is produced by the U.S. Department of Education. It does impact funding options, and it does impact, some of those other pieces. So I'm going to, again, we always start with our objectives. We did the introductory. Yes, there is a boatload of text on your screen, and I'm sure that we are meeting every single one of those objectives because that's what we do. But more specifically, what we're going to focus on today is about those teaching strategies, about those resources and tools that hopefully will support meaningful interaction. Also talking about a communication plan and designing assessments and activities to support interaction, substantive, regular, those kinds of things. And hopefully at the end of this, you get to feel a little bit more confidence in adapting strategies. So as I said, if you've got any questions as we go throughout, please do let me know. In the first workshop, we talked about what is the definition or why are we here. The idea is that the U.S. Department of Education has put forth some new regulations that say that institutions must ensure that all of our distance education courses include regular and substantive interaction. And so we went on to further define some of those elements. What do they mean by regular? What do they mean by substantive? And so when we talk about the regular elements of what is regular interaction, we're really talking about frequency, how often, how well do you do that, as well as whether it's a planned or a scheduled approach. And so we talked about with a planned approach, how are you planning to support interaction, but also how are you reacting to things that where you might see interaction lagging, those kinds of things, if you're seeing that engagement is not actually coming around. With a substantive interaction, the federal regulations actually outline about 5 different elements or areas. And so we'll take those one by one at this workshop to really talk about some of the ideas of approaches and tools that you can use to support each of these areas. So in the rules or regulations, they talk about any 2 of the following will substantiate or become part of what is substantive interaction. And so direct instruction, providing feedback, providing information or responding to questions, specifically about course content or competencies, facilitating a group discussion, or other instructional activities as per institution regulations or professional organization and accreditation kinds of pieces like that. So these were the, again, 5 areas that they outline. I like the other category just because then we can start to talk about what does that really mean. These are specifically applied to distance education courses, and we had defined distance education for us as those courses that fall under MTSU Online purview in terms of quality assurance. And so we were talking about those D-section courses, the completely asynchronous, also the synchronous remote, the synchronous flex now, and then those hybrid blended courses that have elements of asynchronous, but also some synchronous. So that is where we are headed with this. Again, hopefully this is a reminder of those elements, regular and substantive interaction. It is a federal regulation, got put into place about 2021. So moving along, let's talk about strategies for direct instruction. So Again, I like to start with definitions, making sure that we are on the same page, so that when we are talking about different strategies, those can maybe come to mind. So when we think about direct instruction, we're really talking about the elements of the course that are instructor-led, meaning that the instructor is the one composing the message and curating the materials to help explain and present concepts. And this can often be done in a variety of ways, but the idea is that the instructor is presenting information that is organized and sequenced, or we also like to use the word scaffolded, to help the learner progress towards goals that are usually their building of skills, knowledge, and abilities. Again, we start to think about, okay, learning objectives, learning outcomes. And we also talk about that you need to provide clear guidance as an instructor on the approach to or the explanation of those concepts. So again, when you're thinking about direct instruction, it is instructor-led, keeping the student in mind, but that it also has some elements about being organized and sequenced so that students know what they should be getting out of the course. And that's how those explicit guidelines and explanations come about. So when we talk about different approaches, we really are talking about how do you as the instructor show up. This also relates to the community of inquiry, teaching presence element along those ways. And so for strategies, how can you do demonstrations? How might you offer some guided practice? How might you lecture or present information? And that is the narration or description of concepts. And then also, how are you modeling some of the course concepts or the ideas behind the materials that you have curated for your students? So again, thinking about how this comes together, but also how you are representing your experience and your expertise as you are crafting materials to share with your students, or as you are curating materials, pulling things together to help your students focus and really navigate through different elements of your course. And so that just to me leads to then, okay, the overall design of your course. How are you thinking about students and what they're going to be able to do when it comes to the materials that you're hoping that they cover and the outcomes that you need to achieve? So having that in mind, that is what direct instruction tends to look like. And so then we talk about specifically what are those approaches that you might use, or what are those tools that you might use to address these different approaches or strategies. So when I think about demonstration, I like to think about video because I like my students to be able to see. And because we are in an online environment, that idea is that I like a visual that will help students to really kind of dig in deeply into that. When you think about demonstrating different concepts, how might you approach that? What might you do? So you might also think about an audio recording. I think about music a lot, the soundtrack to our lives, right? So how can you help students work through different concepts and ideas using demonstrating through audio or video? For guided practice, that is walking your students through different elements of concepts. I always think about math when that comes up. And so how can we assemble or create a guided practice opportunity? Lecture presentation, that probably seems very simple, and modeling similar to demonstration. So when we're talking about tools, these are the items that we have, Tara and I have had conversations about with the other instructional designers about really, okay, so what do we have available to us at MTSU right now that can help us provide some direct instruction? So we talked about audio recording. D2L, the video note feature, does allow for audio only recording. You don't have to have a video with that. There's our other friend, Panopto. That is our video platform system, but it also will allow you to record audio. You know that you can integrate audio or other elements into a variety of areas in D2L. And so we start talking about, can I provide direct instruction through a discussion board? Absolutely. You as the instructor have experiences and expertise to share, but you can also guide students through concepts and content by posting through the discussion board. We talk a little bit about H5P activities. If you have not worked with H5P, just yet, please know that Tara's got a fabulous workshop coming up in a couple of weeks about how to create H5P activities. These are interactive, I call them learning objects, but the idea is that you can craft an experience for your students where you are sharing your knowledge, your experience, your expertise using an interactive element that can be integrated into D2L. So things like a drag and drop, that's our favorite version of an H5P activity. The idea of can you create an experience for your students where they are practicing and applying based upon your direct or guided instruction? Any type of handout that you create, you're going to see at the end of this presentation that I've created a handout that summarizes all of these approaches and tools that we'll be talking about. But know that that came from my experience, from my expertise, working with Tara, from others, to pull that information together in a way that makes it more accessible to you as the learner, so that you know that you've got some materials to refer to as you are practicing and applying. Again, the direct instruction element of that is that I've put that together. I have curated those resources and I have crafted it in a way that will hopefully give you then the content that you can refer to later on. Traditional lecture presentation slideshow, again, what you're seeing on the screen is something that I've put together. You have done that same thing. You have crafted a presentation, or you have borrowed from a publisher to craft a presentation to give direct instruction, content, competencies along that way. The simulations aspect, I've worked with a couple of different departments that use simulation software. As you know, so you're role playing, you are working with different companies or corporations to go through a leadership development aspect. Mean, our newest instructional designer, has developed some e-learning modules where, again, the direct instruction aspect of that is that you as the instructor have crafted the message to make that into a simulation where students can practice and apply. And then our other favorites, video recording. Absolutely, you can offer direct instruction through a video recording. One of the newer options, which we didn't talk about with audio recording, but the idea of Microsoft Stream, part of our Microsoft 365 license, includes their audio multimedia streaming platform called Stream. You can record as well as host videos and audios there, and then share those out and embed those into D2L. We can talk more about that as well. Web conferencing, what we are doing right now with this workshop, using Zoom to provide some direct instruction, as well as Microsoft Teams. If you haven't had the explanation or that experience yet, welcome to it. And then the last is whiteboards. When we are talking about primarily synchronous remote, synchronous online, anything where you've got some opportunities to direct instruction, give students some specific walkthroughs of problems, you can use whiteboards. Microsoft has a whiteboard. If you haven't done the strategic planning opportunity yet, they have used some other elements in a Microsoft whiteboard area where you can contribute your knowledge and work through different elements. Zoom also offers a whiteboard, which we are not using, but we could use it to gather information as well as to share ideas. So when you're thinking about direct instruction, again, these might be elements you've already crafted, you're creating. What your intention is to provide content in an organized way, to also share your experiences and maybe to fill in some gaps that the idea of the material, the other materials that you use, whether they're articles or websites or other videos, you are sharing your experience and expertise. That is, again, one of the primary elements of direct instruction. So with that, I'm now going to turn the microphone over to you and ask you, how do you provide direct instruction in your courses? Would somebody be willing to share an example of how they do that? And just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up, please.
One of the things that I do is I give video feedback for their papers. And
Excellent.
students seem to like that. It takes more time, but it's actually I've gotten pretty good at it with practice where
Mhm.
I don't know that it really takes that much more time than written.
And in that feedback, we'll talk about that in just a minute. So let me come back to that. Thank you. Other people.
Well, I use a lot of videos from publisher and
Mm,
also virtual labs.
okay. And how did you select those? What went into your process for selecting them? Because you may not use all of the materials that they're presented to you.
I always select based on the difficulty levels and how we want the students to kind of progress.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking about your learning outcomes. You're thinking about what the students need to learn in order to demonstrate that they have achieved a competency or a skill.
Skills and knowledge.
Excellent.
How about others?
I'm a sucker for a lecture. But I write mine. In mine, I have my entire course broken up into 5 modules, and it's like it corresponds to approximately 3 chapters in the text. But the text doesn't say what I want it to say in all places, so I make little extra things to explain concepts that I think should be included but aren't. Then I also have in every module what I call, because I'm from Louisiana, I call it a lagniappe. It's extra stuff that's just really cool or neat or interesting. I think they would like, but there's just not really room for it
Sure.
in what they need to know. But this is stuff I think they'd like to know. So I try to do that. And what's really interesting when you brought this up is when I was talking to my sister who teaches high school special ed, and she's never really taught online. And she was asking about, well, when do you teach? When do you do direct instruction? And now I have an answer for her. So thank you.
Well, I will say your mileage may vary when you talk to many different people about what is direct instruction. This is my particular take on it, because again, if I think to the community of inquiry model and what they talk about teaching presence is really about how you are representing your knowledge, your expertise. Does that mean that you have to be the person always in the video? I don't necessarily believe so. Again, because you are the one curating the materials. You are putting into it the structure that you're thinking will best suit the needs and abilities of your students. So this is my take on it. Again, others may say that it has to be you, the sage on the stage, so to speak. I like the guide on the side, facilitator kind of module and model, and to try to think about how that can reveal itself. We also talk about presence in a way of you as the instructor, and you're going to hear me say this over and over again, also need to be represented in an online course. Students talk about a lot of with the correspondence type courses, that the idea that they don't know who their instructor is. One of the best ways is for you to share your knowledge and expertise, whether it's through a discussion board post, whether it's through a lecture video, or, and I apologize, Anne, I am never going to be able to pronounce or say I'm going to guess a French word, to talk about how you're enhancing what your students are doing and seeing. Only you can provide that connector. And so when I talk about direct instruction, that's what I tend to think about. Again, your mileage may vary, but this is where I am. Thank you very much. Any other comments about or questions about direct instruction or the approaches and tools?
I want to add 2 things because they were brought up and I actually did put it in the chat that
Okay.
virtual labs do fall into that category because they're engaging with material. And if they're doing something wrong, you have to guide them through potentially. And so virtual labs do count as part of that. But the other thing I wanted to say is that if you work with an instructional designer and we ask about what is the purpose of your instructional materials, providing that purpose for the instructional materials within the class is also considered direct instruction because you've told the students, well, I picked this article because of X, Y, and Z, or I picked this because of X, Y, and Z outside of a textbook potentially. And so that also would fall under direct instruction when you're providing that information to the student, because then they are more likely to get out of it what you intend if there is purpose given to them as part of the description or in some way so that they understand how it connects to other things and why it's important, because you do spend time curating materials. And in an online class, you do really have to think about communicating that purposefully. Whereas in a traditional class, it usually just comes out organically through the conversations. So I just wanted to add that that's another way you do get direct instruction.
Thank you. Millicent, you had your hand raised. Please go ahead. If you have a microphone available, please unmute yourself. And then we'll go to Perrin.
Yes, I was just going to talk about using video note. My awesome instructional designer, Miss Tara there, made me aware of that, and my students really like that use of being able to actually talk and see each other and interact. Another thing that I do is I offer, I mean, our courses are totally online, so Zoom is optional, but I offer Zoom at intervals, and during that Zoom time, I have specific things, even though I say, you know, you can come for any other questions you may have, but I have specific things to try to entice them, like to talk about the project that's coming due, you know, what the, make sure everybody's on the same page and understand, you know, what the requirements are.
Excellent. Love that. Thank you, Allison. Go ahead, Clarence.
I use the class email system as well and D2L.
Okay.
For example, just this morning, I emailed my class, letting them know what they should be looking at this point in the course, and giving them an indication of what the issues are that they should be looking for in the material.
Yes.
And then also that I will be available in the Teams chat room for them to come with questions. So at least they know. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at 2 computers right now, so I'm in class. So they know that I'm available for them to come to me with questions just in case
Very
they have
good.
anything. Now, nobody has taken me up on it yet. So if I seem distracted, I'm looking at 2 screens, it's precisely because of that. But that's how I try to engage them directly. So they know I'm
Yes.
present anyway, yeah.
Excellent. And we're actually going to touch upon that in the next couple of slides when we talk about responding to questions and leading further discussion. So thank you for that. All right, we're going to keep moving into talking about our next element when we talk about regular and substantive interaction. Remember one of those, oh, yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Karen, we do have one more hand raised. I
please
wanted
go
to
ahead.
address that before we jumped in.
Yeah,
Virginia.
go ahead. Go ahead, Virginia.
Oh, sorry. I just, wanted to say that there's a couple of things I do. One is I use something common, the news tool, and I post things there like articles, the one about taking notes by hand. I posted an article and said, do you still take notes? And if you do, maybe you ought to close your computer and write it by hand. And I shared the article, and I shared a couple of funny pictures today. One was a sign on a bathroom that said, for eating customers only, and they had a picture of Hannibal Lecter. I said,
grammar is important.
Yes, and I said, since you're studying grammar and writing, do you see a problem here? And the other one was about please use tongues when picking pastry. Tongues instead of tongs. And I said, how about this one? And so I try to do things like that just for funny stuff. And then I also discovered that they don't read instructions well for assignments, and that they will just copy and paste from the instructions into their assignment. So I recorded a video of me pretending to be their boss and saying, okay, I'd like for you to write an email to Miss So-and-so, who's a specialist in social media. And I want you to ask her some questions like, if we were to add a social media expert to our company, who would we need to look for? What would we need to look for? I mean, what does this person need to have in terms of education and that sort of stuff? Works a heck of a lot better than having it written down.
We find that students, there are multi-modes of delivery of information. And, again, we will not talk about the word learning styles as things like that, but we do talk about preferences as well as just what folks are used to these days. So thank you for sharing that. We always, Tara and I know that all the instructional designers at MTSU Online love a good meme game. So we love that we, are creative in the way that we are directing providing some information and instruction. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Absolutely, we shared it. Oh,
Sorry.
sure. Absolutely. No, you're fine. You're fine. So the kind of leads us actually to our next opportunity about feedback. The idea with substantive interaction is that students actually get feedback from you. I know, shocking. But the idea is that it's meaningful feedback on both formative and summative assessment activities. And so again, this is probably not new information to you, but we will reinforce what it means to be meaningful. Tara has come up with, and this was something that we talk about in our online instructor certification course, the idea of how do you model your feedback? And we like to use the word POPSTAR. And so we talk about feedback initially being personalized. It needs to be tailored to the student being assessed. General feedback is awesome, but we know that we need to personalize it to really get a student's attention, as well as to really address what students are needing to do. The O, opportunity for improvement. Feedback is also something that we don't believe that should be viewed only as punitive. What are you doing wrong? Always the things that you're doing wrong. And so we talk about encouraging students to use feedback as an opportunity to improve, and how that contributes to their overall success. Positive, again, this is some of the ways that we can provide students with indicators of where they are being successful in their learning. That also helps a lot with their motivation when you are positive. So you want to reinforce what they're doing right, as well as where are those opportunities for improvement. In terms of specific, make sure that you are trying to provide specific details on where that improvement is needed. Yes, you might need assistance with grammar. Well, specifically, maybe I need more assistance with commas, again, or word choices, those kinds of things. But also where kind of give them direction and guidance for how they can make those improvements more specifically. So you can refer them to resources that they could consult. You could refer them to concepts that they need to review. So in your specific feedback, you could say you need assistance with, maybe you don't know how to create a hyperlink and making a web page. Well, this is, you need more assistance in doing this, make an improvement here. Here's the resource to examine, and then come back and try it again. Timely. Of course, we want to give feedback in a timely manner. We talk about giving it frequently enough, as well as early enough, so that the student can actually make the connection between what they're not doing correctly or where they can improve with the actual concepts that are under assessment. If it's been a couple of weeks since they've turned in the paper and you're just now giving them feedback, that river has already moved on in many ways, unless it's something that you're scaffolding, where they're having, you're having your students work on a same project over time. So we just need to be able to give students frequent feedback in a timely manner, so that they can make those connections to the elements before they actually have to do the next thing or get buried into the next element that goes with that. And so then of course the last one is really about actionable. What steps can they take to make the changes? We might also talk about having them turn the assignment back in so that we can see that they're taking some steps. I think Tara mentioned that I think this was at the first presentation, but how she has given feedback to her students and then asked them to integrate that into their next version of that assignment. And then of course, the last one is respectful. We want to consider the tone of feedback, because words on a screen are challenging. And so I think it was Stephanie who mentioned that she gives video or audio feedback. Again, you get a little bit of tone of impression from that. So we talk about using the POPSTAR model to provide some meaningful feedback, and we've got resources on that as well. Just know that that comes about. When you're thinking about assessment activities, I know we kind of talked about formative and summative. Formative is those activities that are along the way where they're practicing. Summative is the way that they are trying to demonstrate that they have grasped the concept, met the competency along those ways. And so when we're thinking about those kinds of areas, we're talking about then the tools that come to mind. Obviously with discussion board, yes, there is an assessment opportunity in D2L where you can attach rubrics, where you can make an actual grade, provide a grade for a discussion board posts, comments. We also talk about in Dropbox, yes, you can add comments, and as I think Stephanie was talking about, doing text or audio video recording of those comments so that students are getting it right close to what they have submitted. D2L intelligent agents, these are, I'll call them some special programming that is built into D2L where you can automate some messaging, but you can also set up the intelligent agent to trigger based upon a specific action that a student takes when it comes to a grade. And that's why you can also provide some specific feedback in that manner, as well as a timely feedback. If as soon as they achieve that element, then they would get that feedback. Don't forget in D2L quizzes that you can actually add specific feedback to individual questions and answers. And depending upon what settings you choose in D2L quizzes, you can show that feedback or ask them to review that feedback when they get their responses. In Microsoft Office, as you are reading a paper, use the track changes or comments feature to provide some direct feedback to your students as you're working through their written work. We find that that's really helpful, particularly if the student, it might be a little unclear where that opportunity for improvement might be noted. And then the last tool that we talk about is rubrics. Obviously, in D2L, you can attach a rubric to do the grading, but we also think about rubrics in a broader sense, and the idea of it is a way to provide feedback where you have crafted feedback that is general to try to address the major components, but then also there should be space for specifics within each of those criteria along those ways. And so we want to make sure that you are thinking about feedback in sort of at the general level, but also at the more specific in terms of the elements that you are trying to assess. And we've talked about using these tools in a variety of ways, and it will somewhat depend upon the type of object that your students are submitting to be assessed. So for homework, I know Kim Godwin, who used to a former instructional designer, now with the College of Education, talked about having students submit infographics rather than a paper. And so when you're thinking about, again, the feedback and creating those rubrics, you really want to think about what are the key concepts that you are trying to assess and attaching those back to the actual learning outcomes and objectives that you are trying to achieve. And so again, I will take a moment and say, what have been your experiences with providing feedback, or do you have any other suggestions, tips, tricks, things like that for providing meaningful feedback to students?
What I have started doing is I have a Google Doc full of basically boilerplate of common problems that I find, particularly in my discussion post, and a lot of it is like somebody mentioned earlier, they just weren't following directions. That's it.
Reading is fundamental. Yes.
Yes. So I do that. I usually like, hey, I think History Day they had a cute little graphic when I judged History Day on Friday, and it was a sandwich of feedback where you have something positive, then constructive, and then you end with positive. And that's what the POPSTAR I think is really cute too. But that's what I try to do is I'm like, hey, you did this really great, but remember, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And you lost points here, and that, I really hate that you lost a grade because you didn't follow directions. Here, here's constructive stuff, and this is a really great start. If you're having trouble, let me know, blah, 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 all that stuff. But having the use of intelligent agents changed the way I approached a lot of stuff, particularly people who are consistently not doing the same type of assignment. And so I have several set up. So if they haven't completed, like say the first discussion post by a certain date, it automatically sends it, says, hey, do you remember you have this assignment? Please do this assignment. And I have a lot students who have gotten those have said, oh my God, I totally forgot about this. Thank you so much. That's such a great thing. I love it. And I've also had other students tell me that they have taken online classes at MTSU where their instructors never gave them feedback on anything. They were really shocked not only that they got feedback, but that it was personalized and it had very specific things that they could do to improve their grade. And they were just like, if my other teachers had done this, I would have done better in the class. So use all the tools.
Yes, absolutely. Again, great points. The idea of providing that specific feedback. You saw the sandwich. We've also heard of it as the Oreo approach to feedback, cookie, fantastic cream, cookie, those kinds of things. We like to think that the cream of the learning is really, the important stuff, what they need, where they need to address to get better, things like that. So other comments or other thoughts about feedback?
I try to make it as personal voice I can. Like I call them by name, you know, I'll say, Sandy, you didn't do, you know, whatever it was, and then I'll say, what happened, you know, and put a little emoji or, you know, just try to like I'm talking to you. And then they have to do a reflection paper, and I try to, and I like when they do it more than just to, you know, get these answers.
Right.
Rather than, you know, the reflection paper is supposed to be more introspective. And so when they do that, you know, I try to make sure I respond positively to either encourage or acknowledge what was said.
Right. And again, I think we have no idea the impact of our words and our approaches. And so we're trying to make those as personable and humanized, particularly in the online asynchronous world. You know, nobody sees me. No, you know, it used to be on the internet, no one knows your dog, but it turns out that people do get to know you, and they can. And we want to make sure that our students are feeling supported. But you also have a partnership or a relationship with your student in that you are comfortable talking with them about where are things going well, but also where things need to be improved. That opens a lot of doors. Again, that talks a little bit about retention. Students are feeling heard and seen. And so we want to encourage that as well. Again, going back to the idea of the impetus behind this was, if you think about what a correspondence course used to look like, again, back in the day, you would submit something and then be like, yes, I get to go on. No, I don't. I don't entirely know. But the idea is that you would not necessarily get specific information back from the instructor to know that I am on the right track, to do that self-awareness element kinds of things. So, all right, I got to keep moving because I see that my time keeps going by so quickly. I just don't understand where it goes. All right. So then we talk about the element about responding to questions and providing additional information on course concepts. And so what are the mechanisms or strategies that are in place that allow students to ask questions of the instructor and for the instructor to respond? So Tara mentioned in our online design process, the idea of discussion boards. Do you have a course Q&A discussion board where students can ask general questions about what's going on, where you can also answer multiple questions with one post, so to speak? We talk about email and messaging. What elements do you have set up where you are ready to respond to a student question through email or through a message system? News announcements, also great. I think Clarence was the one who mentioned that, you know, posting what's going on, how is this moving forward for the next session to keep us moving through the week, through the modules, those kinds of things. And then of course we talk about office hours. And I realize that one of the newer terminologies that we've been using is student hours. Students might not know what office hours really are. Is that when you're in your office, am I supposed to be able to bother you then or not bother you? And the idea is that it's not about bothering, but it's also about the student. And so when we think specifically about some of those tools that come up, we really are talking about, obviously, the course Q&A discussion board. We provide that as a template. If you don't know what that looks like, it really is just an open discussion board where students can ask questions. You ask them to refrain from posting questions about specific grades and things like that. But it's a place where you can see what the questions are that are coming up, and then you can address them further from what you're getting in terms of posts from that. News announcements. I know I work with other faculty member who will post updates, or here's a current event that relates to what we're talking about this week or during this module that we're in. To think about as you are responding to a question or providing additional information, don't forget that that news announcement is out there. We talk about email and messaging. I know we all get a ton of email. We talk about in D2L, there's separate email from your regular MTSU email and how to manage that to make that happen. And then our latest or most recent version is about messaging and the fact that you can set up a Teams area for your particular student course, whatever you'd like to do. And it has a chat channel involved in it. And again, you want to think about what are those policies around that, but how can I use that to communicate with students, to respond to questions, or to ask students to have to post questions there, because other students may be able to answer. Then we talk about web conferencing tools for virtual office hours, and I believe that through the pandemic we have all learned the idea is to be online at a time when your students know that you are available. Make sure that's out there. Students may or may not join those sessions because they may not know exactly how to best use that time. So if you can provide some examples of that, making that happen. We know, I know some other faculty members have actually used a Zoom study space as a study space where they can provide a little bit more direct instruction for those who have questions, or they will record a short video using Zoom to be like, okay, so this was the question that came up, here's how we go about that. We've talked about video note in D2L as well. So when I think about what are the mechanisms or strategies that you all are using to respond to student questions, to ask for student questions, what are we missing here? Are there other areas that we're missing?
You could use the survey tool as well in D2L to ask
Awesome.
questions of your students.
How
Or an
often should I do that?
H5 people. I'm sorry.
How often should I do a survey? Do you think? What's your thoughts?
My initial thought is doing a survey, depending on the length of the course, beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
What are you bringing with your knowledge? Where are we at in the middle? And what do you think you're leaving with?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think about those
Absolutely.
when I talk to other faculty about it.
Awesome. Love the idea of the H5P poll because again, it gets you, just as I did with the Zoom meeting, it's an initial piece, but it also can be an area where you're grabbing, okay, so what's going on? What are the questions? Yeah, go ahead, Anne.
Okay. I know I tend to dominate conversations. Sorry, but I have to say that again, use all the tools. I do all of this, and I try to do it consistently. Like every Monday by 10 a.m., I have the weekly roundup of what we've done, what we're going to do. I try to start with something funny, or like this week I was behind on grading, so I talked about time being timey-wimey and wibbly-wobbly, and then I had like a Doctor Who video because I'm a dork. And then we talked about stuff that they really need to talk about. And then I close with like a fun video. Like this week it was the Squirrel Olympics. But I do try to connect because I'm in history. I do try to connect with current events or, like during Mardi Gras, talked a little about the history of Mardi Gras and link to the live cam of the New Orleans parades, to try to keep it fun. So and when I don't post, if I don't post at 10 a.m., students will go, "Are you okay? You didn't post. Are you all right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just fine." But then I post it, but then I also send an email with the same exact information. I just copy and paste and email it to the class. So people who maybe just go directly to the discussions or directly to the quizzes or whatever they're doing, and they skip the homepage because they can, they still can't, they have the information and they can't say they didn't know because it's there.
Right.
But everybody, I have found that students take in that kind of information differently. And so I try to use everything to make sure that they get the information that they need. With the office hours, student hours, this is a personal thing that you and I need to talk about, Karen. The book with me thing, it does not do my right hours.
Oh no.
So that's a personal thing. I'll email you about how to fix it.
Yes.
It's annoying because students have tried to do it and I have it set for my student hours. That should be the only time that it works, but then it lets them book at 8 a.m. and I don't do 8 a.m.
So the tool that Anne is actually referencing, part of your Microsoft Outlook is a tool called Bookings. It is part of our Microsoft 365 license where you can set up, I usually have a link in my email where it says book a time with me. So students can request to schedule a meeting with you. And so that is one of the items I left off the list. So thank you, Anne, for doing that, for mentioning that, because again, trying to think about how do you get to student questions? Well, if you make yourself available, what's the easiest path for them to be able to find you? Emails can often get lost. And so we want to make sure that we provide some different alternatives to that. So absolutely, Microsoft Bookings, it's one of those features that's kind of like Meet with Me or when is good. That's another option where you can set up Calendly, those kinds of things where you can set up a calendar where students can pick their dates and times to do that. But again, the idea is what are the mechanisms and strategies? And so you've got the opportunity then to offer your students a way that they can come ask questions. I love the idea that you can also summarize as well as post it back to the students, offering them an alternative. If you didn't catch it in one channel, you can catch it in another. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So one of the ways I feel like it combines some of the things you have here of answering student questions. So they shoot me an email and they've got a question, and I'm in IT stuff. So it's complicated something. And so I'll go in and I'll do an individual Zoom meeting and record what I've got to the cloud. And then I'll send them back my my Zoom link, like, here's me like trying to figure out the problem that you described in your email so that they can see me problem solving in addition to answering their questions. So it's a,
Awesome.
very interactive sort of, as much as you can asynchronously, helping them to learn, right?
Right. Again, it's the feedback, it's the responding to questions, it's the inviting guided practice, walking through different steps. Absolutely. Multitasking in the same type of an approach. So fabulous. All right, moving on. Facilitating group discussion. I feel like this is again part of the less than diversive area, I don't know. But the idea of how do you facilitate a group discussion regarding the content of a course, competency, course concept, those kinds of things. There just needs to be evidence of instructor presence in that interaction. And so we talk about what are the prompts that you have created to initiate the conversation? How are you responding to student posts? And we talk about, it doesn't have to be every post unless you want to start that way, but it can be selective response. Guiding discussion through additional prompts or questions, that idea of, I've taken what they've gotten in, maybe they're off track, maybe they're on the right track. This is how I can jump in to help guide, maybe ask some additional questions, but also the idea of summarizing. After we've had a week of discussion, what are those key things that I should take away that maybe I should talk about next or be prepared for? Helping your students wrap up the conceptual and get them prepared for the next. So again, I feel like these are tools that everybody has known. The idea of the D2L discussion board, you also have a D2L groups area where you can separate out, compartmentalize the discussions based upon those who are in a group. We do have access to Flip, formerly known as Flipgrid, where you can do more video and audio-based discussion, where you're leaving video comments or audio comments based upon a specific element. Obviously, in Microsoft Teams, you've got a chat channel where you can do additional messaging for group discussion. I know that there are other chat options out there. We won't talk about those. And then social annotation tools. Perusal is one of the ones that I believe the English department has used, and I also know of Hypothesis. And what that is again having a central object upon which people are commenting. I've most likely seen it with articles or documents or a book where you want students to go through and highlight the passages that make the most sense to them and to comment on that, to have a discussion around that object based upon different elements. I've seen it done with graphic novels where people will tag stuff along those ways. And so we want you to think about, how is that a group discussion and how are you as the instructor facilitating that? Well, first of all, you're starting with the object, but then you're also encouraging comments and things like that. So again, I think most people are familiar with discussion, but facilitating, you need to have a presence in any of these options with these tools. Otherwise, the students won't get to hear your fabulousness in terms of your experiences and expertise, but also may get a little off track. So how do you kind of keep them guided? And unfortunately, again, I'm looking at time, so I want to make sure that we keep moving through the last couple of slides so that we've got that and we can come back to any of these concepts as we wrap up. So the last one is about those other engagement and interaction measures that may be something that the institution or your program's accrediting body has suggested. So that's talking about internships, field experiences, service learning or experiential learning activities. The idea of how might you as the instructor create and craft or guide these activities for a better engagement for your students. So these are just some examples. When I think about what are the best tools to support that? Obviously, there is the D2L Dropbox. Yes, you can have your students reflect upon their experiences, submit an experience log, submit, different elements of a video, a banner, a brochure of what their experiences are. The e-portfolio system that's part of D2L is also something that will capture a variety of objects that will lead you to believe that they have achieved competencies or met the course objectives. And then, of course, web conferencing. You could have a fabulous guest speaker come in to do some experiential learning or thinking about where that service learning comes in. So as you are thinking about within your profession, within your discipline, what are some of those other activities that might be considered substantive interaction, where you have crafted and helped design an experience that your students would be able to practice and apply the knowledge and skills and abilities? So with that, I'm going to say that those were the 5 elements under the substantive. We talked about direct instruction. We talked about feedback. We talked about responding to questions and providing additional information. And then we talked about other activities as well as facilitating a group discussion. Those again are the 5. Two of those 5 areas are what the federal regulations talk about in terms of how do we demonstrate as an institution that we are meeting their regulations. So it does sound like most folks have those opportunities and are taking advantage of them. We would be loving to talk with you further about if you want some additional ideas. We love to brainstorm about how can we be creative in meeting these needs. As we talk about with the development process, we do like to work with faculty and really kind of explore all of the tools that make sense to support your specific objectives along those ways. So I'm going to wrap up and say, this is a lot of information and this is a lot of work. We're not going to lie. Yes, it is. The best way to achieve meeting these standards is just really to talk about how you are design and planning your courses. And so we talk about your time management. We also talk about your students' time management. What are you doing to help your students manage their time? You're guiding them through the course. You are providing direct instruction, but also what are you as an instructor doing to help with that? We talk a lot about course calendars. We talk about setting due dates because those will be represented in D2L. We talk about using checklists. D2L has a checklist feature that allows you to help your students walk through step by step. Again, guided practice opportunities. You can use discussions for those as well to try to figure out, okay, so first you need to do this, and then you need to be able to respond to these particular prompts as we're working through that. You can ask them, you can use it as a a study guide. Do I remember these questions? Can I answer these questions based upon what I was supposed to do for the activities? We also talk about a communication plan, and we will share with you a communication plan that has been suggested. And basically, we're just asking you to outline and plan how are you going to be proactive in your communications? What might you say? As well as then how can you be reactive? If my student has this, someone talked about having a Google Doc of, sort of canned responses that comes up. A communication plan will help you outline at what point of the semester or at what point of the course should I be communicating with students and in what way. If you plan that out ahead of time, then hopefully by the time you're actually teaching the class, that will be something that you can either automate or you at least have worked that into your progress. And the last is an interaction plan. Again, when you think about how am I going to engage my students, that is really thinking about how might I plan experiences for my students to really get them to talk. That doesn't mean death by discussion board. What that means is where is the discussion board the best opportunity for your students to interact and engage? To think about where am I providing the best elements of direct instruction that my expertise and experience will come through, that will help my students get connected along those ways. And so those are the things that we want you to think about as you're planning your courses. MTSU Online is available to assist in those conversations, and we love talking with you. And I will say at that, I will wrap up. This is the content. I hope that it's been useful, but I will now ask for questions. and comments at this point? I have no idea what's gone on in chat, so I appreciate that Tara has been manning that, personing that, excuse me, and appreciate that you all have been here.
I was just letting them know we do have an infographic, a one sheet that basically tells you all of this information.
Yes.
It looks fantastic. I tried to share it, but I think there's a few little permissions because Karen created it. She shared it with me, but then I tried to share it and it's like, no, you can't do that. So we'll get
Nice
that figured
try.
out.
Okay.
But in that infographic, we have an abundance of links to those resources regarding communication plans, interaction plans, you know, how you might be able to use a particular checklist, et cetera. So they're linked directly in there as well. And we will make sure on top of this recording being posted, we'll make sure that the center sends out the PowerPoint as well as the templates that we have for those things.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll make sure that happens. And thank you for attending. We know we literally talked until 12:30, but if you have a few minutes and want to stay longer, we will stay on to answer any kind of questions, of course.
And Virginia, please go ahead.
I just had a question about Flip. You mentioned Flip. Is that integrated into D2L or would that be outside D2L and then you just...
You will be able to integrate it in. So with Flip, you get the embed code and then you can insert it into D2L. So that it makes it an easier access point. The activity itself will be hosted on Flip, but there is, and actually I think under the additional activities in a content area, I believe Flip is one of the choices, or if not, it's an external learning tools that can be used. The same thing with Perusal as well.
Okay, I do have questions about Flip. So
Okay.
it is pretty new. Are you guys going to do any kind of workshop or?
We haven't had that conversation, but we can definitely talk about that. Particularly, Flip was recently, well, I don't know how recently, purchased by Microsoft, and so it does kind of fall under our Microsoft licensing. So otherwise, it was considered an outside resource. But we will talk that over. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you for all of this great info. I really appreciate it.
It was a bit of a drinking from a fire hose, but we appreciate that.
That's okay.
Awesome.
And thank you for the suggestion because it is relatively new. And so we really do take suggestions from faculty about what they need because it's all about what y'all need to best help your students. So Karen and I will add that to our talking points when we meet on a regular basis, almost daily.
Our regular and substantive interaction amongst us.
Right.
Well, that's good. That's good to know. I've got to design the new master course for BizCom because we're getting a new book. Well, it's an updated book, but it's got AI in it and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so my job's going to be to design the new course, and I just put in stuff to do that. So I need some of these new things that you guys are talking about, and so I'll need to work with you all to get this thing done correctly. And yeah, it's going to take a lot of work, but I don't have to have it ready till the spring. But that doesn't mean I can just lay around and
get your proposal in now, is what we'll say.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, please get a proposal in now, and then hopefully we will be working together shortly thereafter.
Barry signed whatever he had to sign. I did it, sent it to him.
Very
he sent it on its way. So I'm just waiting for y'all to send me whatever has to be sent to me. And
that will come after the
April
proposal
1st.
window closes April 1st. And so that information will come to you should come to you sometime in April.
Okay, that'll be great. That'll be great.
Should, not wills around
so I
here.
can work with you guys over the summer then.
Yes, ma'am. You'll get assigned an instructional designer. And if it's a BizCom class, hi, I'm your instructional designer.
Yay, it's a BizCom
so you'll
class.
be assigned to me.
It's a BizCom class. That's what it is. That's the one that has to be reworked. So yeah, that'll be great. Yay. Well,
yes,
I agree to it.
Me
cool.
too.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm gonna let you guys go. Stop talking to me.
All good.
Well, we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Yes. Thanks for being here.
Bye.